Yeah.
What exactly do you do for NHS?
What exactly do I do for
No,
NHS?
Just like, what does this do?
So there are fundraisers.
Okay. It's for the school?
There's service hours.
What are the service hours? Like, what do you do?
Well, you'll talk about that and terminals, but Mr. Scruggs is the other person to talk to about that. The thing is, NHS looks really good on your resume. It's really helpful for colleges. Colleges are going to expect that a student with a high GPA is in NHS, and if a student with a high GPA isn't in NHS, I will put this. Hi, sorry about this, Angela. Answering another question. I'll be with you in a moment. If it's not on there, they're going to wonder what caused this not. So I don't see any reason not to do it. But they'll know that. In fact, they'll not only see all of your grades, literally they see what percentage grade you got in other classes. Okay, so we're on a preface, and it says, how much faith do you need to believe this book? We're going to read both. I have no idea what the plural is of prefaces. I'm not sure. But we're going to read both of the preface in these books, and then we'll talk about some questions. Religious skeptics believe that books like this one can't be trusted for objective information because such books are written by religious people who have an agenda. In fact, that's the way skeptics view the Bible. It's a biased book written by biased people. Their assessment may be true for some books about religion, but it's not true for all of them. If it were, you couldn't trust anything you read concerning religion, including books written by atheists or skeptics, because every writer has a viewpoint on religion. So what does this mean to you, the reader? Should you disbelieve what an atheist writes about Christianity just because he's an atheist? Not necessarily, because he could be telling the truth. Should you disbelieve what a Christian writes about atheism just because he's a Christian? Again, not necessarily. He too could be telling the truth. But what about an author's agenda? Does an agenda fatally taint his objectivity? If so, no book is objective, including those by atheists and skeptics. Why? Because all books are written for a reason. All authors have an agenda, and all, or at least most, authors believe what they write. However, that doesn't mean that what they write is false or not objective. While authors are almost never neutral about their topics, personal interest is what drives them. They nevertheless can present their topics objectively. For example, survivors of the Holocaust who wrote about their experience certainly were not neutral bystanders. They believed passionately that the Nazis were wrong, and they were driven to record their experiences so the world would never forget the Holocaust, and hopefully never repeat it. Did their passion for or their agenda cause them to bend the facts? Not necessarily. In fact, their passion may have produced the opposite effect. While passion may induce some people to exaggerate, it may drive others to be all the more meticulous and accurate so as not to compromise the credibility of the message they wish to communicate. As you'll see, we think the authors of the Bible took this meticulous and accurate road. It's also the road we're trying to take in this book. And when you're done reading, we hope you'll let us know what you think if you think we've actually taken that road. In the meantime, if you're a skeptic, please keep in mind that you should believe or disbelieve what we say because of the evidence we present, not because we have a certain set of religious beliefs. We are both Christians, but we're not always Christians. We came to believe through evidence. So the fact that we are Christians is not the issue. Why we are Christians is the important point. And that's the focus of this book. Now we'll turn to the preface of the study guide, which was written by Norm Geisler and Jason Newman. Not Frank Turk. place where you'll answer questions about what you've read. It's no secret that America has become a nation of biblical illiterates. And though things may seem to be getting worse, we believe, however, we can turn the tide by equipping Christians to know and defend the faith. That's why we are excited to offer an official study guide to the classic book, I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist, so that Christians can gather in small groups throughout America and beyond to examine the overwhelming evidence that proves Christianity is true. It is our prayer that God will ignite a movement of people hungry to know His truth and become devoted defenders of the Christian faith in a hostile culture. May the book and the companion study guide of I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist be a helpful resource that will enrich your journey and enhance your defense of Christianity. So those are the two prefaces. And now I'm going to use this. This is kind of a curriculum guide. I don't use it very often, but I do want to use it for this. I'm going to read a little bit, and then we're going to just orally talk about some questions. So this is where I remind you that this is a discussion-based class. And if you don't discuss, we're going to spend a whole lot of time in painful silence. And I'm not even like, you don't have to raise your hand. Just say something. Don't talk over someone. And, two people start talking at the same time, and one of you goes. But, yeah, I'm happy if you just tell me what you think. Questions that grab your mind. What is the meaning of life? Is there an ultimate purpose to our existence, or is life just a glorified Monopoly game in which the object is to get as much stuff as you can now, because when the game is over, it's all going back in the box? One preacher put it like this: one day, you're going to die. Then your family and friends are going to dress you up and put you in a box, lower you into a hole, throw dirt on your face, and then go back to church and eat potato salad. After years of building a life and developing deep, loving relationships, does the consciousness that is you evaporate when you take your last breath? You simply return to dust. Real, ultimate, unchanging meaning depends on it depends on a real, ultimate, unchanging being, God. If there is no God, then there is no ultimate purpose to life. We are just molecules in motion. We live for a short time, and then we cease to exist. Even atheist Richard Dawkins, who is probably the most famous atheist on the planet, admits that there is no meaning to life without God. He writes, "Nature is not cruel, only pitilessly indifferent. This is one of the hardest lessons for humans to learn. We cannot admit that things might be neither good nor evil, neither cruel nor kind, but simply callous, indifferent to all suffering, lacking all purpose. Is there a God? Is there a real purpose to life? Will we live on after we die, or simply cease to exist?" These are just a few of the questions we will explore during this study. So, based on stuff you've heard or things you've thought about or read or whatever, how would you define the meaning of life? What is the meaning of life? So from a Christian standpoint, I'm repeating for Angela, from a Christian standpoint, glorify God, and to what was the second thing to worship? Worship Him with our being. Okay? What else? What's the meaning of life? Let's go ahead, Davis. Yeah, there'd be many who would say there is no meaning. Life is random. It is happen chance. You get what you get, and Yeah, there is no meaning. There is no underlying purpose. Is that like helpful? Is that motivating? Is that I think a lot of what we're seeing in our culture, has a lot to do with if there is no meaning in life, what is there to care? Um, so yeah. Now, I asked you what you think the meaning of life is, and Davis opened up the door. Just this doesn't have to be what you think the meaning of life is, but what do you think people in the culture around us, or maybe you, but what do you think, or in the culture around us is how people would answer that? Like if this was I don't know if you guys probably don't remember Dave Letterman, but he was Late Show host, and he'd do these man on the street interviews. So if you did this man on the street interview and said, "What's the meaning of life?" What kind of answers do you think you'd get? Yep, find what makes you happy and do it. Have fun. What? Be successful. However you define that, right? Whatever you define as success. How do you think our culture defines success?
Rich, wealthy.
Yeah. Money, social status, stuff, right? I mean, if they say he's a successful man, it's not going to be somebody that's stocking themselves at Walmart, right? But that may be a successful person, right? In fact, maybe a more successful person in life than the guy that's got the house. Anything else that people say is the meaning of life, or would say, in this man on the street interview? Live in the moment. That's a big one, yeah. And is that wrong, do you think? Not necessarily, right? I mean, this is something I've tried to teach myself more. I tend to be thinking ahead, like, oh, and then I lose today, right? But as a meaning of life sort of thing, maybe not the best one, dude. Anything else? I think a lot of people would say, take care of those who love, build relationship, and those sorts of things. Again, not necessarily bad things. It's maybe not the ultimate meaning. So this is a kind of a dumb question, but I'm going to add a why or why not. So I want the why or why. Without God, does life have any meaning? Why or why
As you're living for the world.
not? What's here? Um, Everything's going to fade away. Um, I think this is a little bit of and then it says ultimate meaning, because life can have meaning, right? Uh, even if someone is an atheist, right? Uh, they can find meaning in helping others, or find meaning in loving relationships, or find meaning in um, you know finding a cure for cancer or something like that. But ultimately, like eternal meaning, I think requires something more than just the physical. It requires, in the case of the Christian worldview, requires a creator who created us to live in relationship and redeemed us so that we could. Okay, so the next thing says, so what? One of the most relevant and important subjects you can ever investigate is eternity. Why? Because you're going to be dead a lot longer than you're going to be alive. If we exist forever on the other side of the grave, and if our choices on this side determine how we spend eternity, then it's vitally important for us to investigate these questions here on Earth. So, how do we go about exploring the question of eternity? Well, it begins with the question of truth. Some say there is no absolute truth, that everything is just a matter of opinion. Anybody see a hole in that logic? What is it? If I say there's no such thing as absolute truth, there is only opinion. That's my opinion. I'm stating that as absolute. We'll talk about self-defeating statements as we As we will see in the next lesson, the assertion that there is no absolute truth logically contradicts itself. After all, if there is no truth, then not even atheism can be true. I don't have enough faith to be an atheist begins with the basic question of whether truth exists and uses logic and evidence. And using logic and evidence arrives at the conclusion that the Bible is true. If this line, it takes a little if this line of reasoning is correct, and be sure you examine the evidence for yourself, don't just take the author's word for it, then the truth is that you will live for eternity. This gives everything you do today an eternal meaning. There can't be anything more important than that. The 5 most consequential questions in life. In college, Dr. Turek was exploring the question of whether God exists, but his university professor couldn't even give him a basic framework that could provide answers to the biggest questions. That's what a worldview does. It's like the box top to a jigsaw puzzle. A worldview shows you how the pieces of life fit together. The true worldview shows you the true answers to life's biggest questions. Unfortunately, the most important question to humanity, does God exist, didn't receive much serious thought at Dr. Turek's university. Since the default worldview of most university professors is atheism, classes are taught with the assumption that there is no God. But any worldview, including atheism, has to provide satisfactory answers for life's biggest questions. Think about Dr. Turek's story about his religion professor. Have you ever been in a situation where someone mocked or questioned the veracity of the Bible? What did you say or do? In that situation? Yeah, Jake. Oh, you don't want to tell us about it?
I mean, like you say, go to a Christian school and
Brainwash, right? That's what I'm trying to do. Were you going to say something, Kate? I certainly found that to be true in college, time and time again. I raised my hand in my religion class. I have a problem with Josephine. My professor said I don't have a problem with Josephine. I have a problem with that, right? And yeah, you're going to find that unless you go to a Christian college. You're going to find that there's a lot of atheistic professors, especially at public universities. So, what do you think is the best answer of each of these 5 questions? The first one is, where did we come from? What?
our mom.
Well, yes. we're talking about like from a Christian worldview. Where do we come? Where do we go? What? God created us. God knitted us together in our mother's womb. Psalm 139. And then here are the other questions, and we'll be talking about these. So where do we come from? Who are we? Why are we here? How should we live? And where are we going? So we'll move more into that in the days to come. But for right now, we'll stop there, and you've got some extra time. You know, you can't go Christian or like all just. But if you have something else you need to work on, you can do that if you want to have. Hand with.